Lab Nugget administering a database. Our last lab nugget here is going to have you configure security, implement a backup and recovery strategy, and automate ongoing maintenance. Let's head into the virtual Nugget Lab one more time and walk through it. All right, back on our SQL Nugget machine, let's bring up SQL Server Management Studio. We'll be working in the last project here, Lab Administering a Database. Again, run setup.sql here to get our databases in the state that we need them to in order to work with this lab. And once that's complete, open up our lab instructions. And we're going to start here with security. Our first task within security is going to have you create a SQL login named Junior Dev with a strong password. Pretty straightforward, right? To create a login that is SQL, all we need to do is say create login Junior Dev with password and give it a password. So we're not tying it to any Windows authenticated account. And if we execute this, let's go ahead and do so. Now we can see it if we head into security, and if we refresh our logins, there it is. There's our Junior Dev right beneath our Junior DBA. Back to the lab instructions here. Our second task is going to have you create a database user in MusicDB mapped to the server login previously created. Again, you can find the answers for security here in 2-security.sql. But let's take a look at our second one. What we need to do is switch our context here to MusicDB. And then we're going to create a database user. So we're going to do a create user within this database called Junior Dev for the login Junior Dev that we just created above. So this is going to map our database user to our server level login Junior Dev. And let's go ahead and execute that. And now, if we look in MusicDB, underneath security, underneath users, we should see our Junior Dev within. Now our next task is going to have you grant execute permissions on the get tracks stored procedure in the music database to the Junior Dev user we just created. So if we head into programmability under MusicDB, our setup added a stored procedure in here called get tracks. So we want to grant the user we just created permissions to that. Obviously we could do that in the UI, but we've been doing everything the SQL way, so let's keep it up. So here is what that code looks like. Grant execute on object, and that object is going to be our get track stored procedure to our user Junior Dev. As simple as that. Let's execute that. Let's go into the properties in the UI here for our stored procedure, into permissions, and look at that. Just to verify, there it is. Junior Dev has execute permissions on the stored procedure. Now in order to test that, as our next task is going to have us do, we're going to need to switch the security context of this query window to Junior Dev. Because notice our security context right now, you can actually see it right up here in the tab, is administrator, which is, is privileged as it gets here on this server. So in order to do this, we're going to execute as user Junior Dev. That's going to switch our security context to that user. And you can actually verify that because it's not going to change the text up here in the tab. But we can verify that using a security function called suser sname. Just like so. And boom, you can see we are now Junior Dev. That is our security context. So let's see if this works. It should, right? We just saw that over there in the permissions dialog, and it does. Cool. Now, our next step is going to have us revoke the execute permissions and retest execution. So we'll stay logged in here as, actually we can't stay logged in because we can't revoke permissions from ourselves. So we need to execute a revert, which will put us back to the administrator, right? So now we're administrator again. We can verify that with suser sname. Perfect. And now let's execute this to revoke permissions from Junior Dev. Once again, let's switch security context back to Junior Dev and now try to execute get tracks. We know this won't work because they do not have execute permissions. Cool. So that was our security challenge there. Getting you familiar with creating a login, mapping a user to a database, giving them a permission to a stored procedure, and then testing that permission out. Let's answer a couple of questions together here. Number one, what is the difference between Windows and SQL authentication? Remember, Windows authentication is really just SQL Server sitting on top and piggybacking on top of Active Directory accounts. SQL authentication is security completely managed here by SQL. So we'll need to create the users and manage and give them passwords and manage those users here within SQL. The next one, what is the difference between a server login and a database user? Remember, a server login grants access to the server, and we can control permissions to server level securables. Database users are at the database level. We'll give them access to the database and control database level securables at that level. Finally here, what is the difference between a principal, securable, and permission? A principal is anything that can access a resource. A securable is anything that has permissions tied to it that resources access. And a permission is the action that a principal can perform against a securable. All right, let's move on to our second challenge here, which is going to be working with backup and restore. So let's first go ahead and just close out of security here, and let's open up backup restore. All right. So our first task here is to ensure that the MusicDB is using the full recovery model. Again, you can verify this by going into the properties of the database. If you want to do this the SQL way, we can run an alter database, specify the name of the database, and then set recovery and whatever recovery model we want to do. So this will set that to the full recovery model. Pretty straightforward there. Our next one is going to have you create a full backup of MusicDB. Again, you can do this in the UI just by right-clicking on the database, going into tasks, and then doing a backup, or the SQL way here, just a backup database. We've looked at this code many times, but backup database, name of the database you want to back up, and then where you want to back it up to. And we're going to back this up to our SQL Server backups directory over there on our B drive. Let's go ahead and hit execute. Perfect. Done. Now, the next thing we're going to do is add some data into any table and then create a differential backup. So let's do that. So I'm going to add just a couple of records here into the track table. Boom. And now let's do a differential backup, which is the same syntax as backup database. The only difference here is you're adding a with differential. And obviously we're giving the file name here that we can see as a differential as well. So execute it. Boom. Now we have a differential. Now next up, what we're going to do is something interesting. I'm going to have you execute this block of code here to basically insert a record every second up to a minute. So we'll get 60 records inside of here. So all this is a little loop here, which is going to loop through. It's going to pause for a second, then insert a record. Then it's going to do it again. Pause for a second, insert a record. And it's going to keep track of the loop and also use this I variable, this counter, as part of the name of the album. So it's going to be new album 1, new album 2, new album 3, all the way up to 60. So let's go ahead and do that. And this was, I'm setting it up here so you can recover to a specific point in time. Kind of a fun little demo. So let's go ahead and execute this. Boom. That's going to take a minute to execute. So I'll be back when this is done. All right, it's done. We can verify that by doing a select star from track. And let's just make sure we got that data in there. If we scroll all the way to the bottom, check it out. It's good to go. So all of those records are in there, and now we should easily be able to do a point-in-time restore to that point. Now, I did already take a transaction log backup, but that's the next thing you want to do is take a log backup. So remember, it's very simple. Just like a backup database, only do a backup log. So now we've got a differential, and a log backup ready to go. And the last step then is to restore the database to a specific point in time. In order to do that, though, you'll need to set the database to single user. When we're done, we can set it back to multi-user. And you can do this in code here by executing an alter database, set single user with rollback immediate. We'll kick everybody out of there. Then we could restore, and then we can set it back to multi-user. And I showed you the SQL for this here, but what I want to do is use the UI because it'll be a lot easier to get it back to that specific point in time because we can graphically see things. But here is the SQL for reference. So let's go ahead and right-click on MusicDB, go into Tasks, do a Restore Database. Here it is. Here are those 3 backups that we did. Now, notice Timeline over here. Let's go into Timeline. And let's go specific date and time. Let's push this down to the hour so we can see. Here is our full, here is our differential, and here is our transaction log. So we want to do this somewhere right in between here, and we could drag this around to do just that. So let's try to get it right in the middle, right around record 30. There it is. That should be right around record 30, right in the smack in the middle of that minute when that loop was running and putting that data inside of there. Cool. Now another thing you want to do is just make sure you go to Options, Overwrite the existing database, and we don't need to do any sort of tail log backup because we didn't put any more data in after this. Also, close existing connections to the database. That will put it in single user mode. And then when we're done, we can head back into the properties of the database and put it into multi-user mode or just execute that SQL that I have down there. Now, I lost my OK button because of the resolution, but if you click down in this area and hit enter on your keyboard, it will start executing it. Let's see if it works. So it's preparing, and wow, that went really quick. But it should be good. Now, if we head into tables, actually, you know what? We've got quite a few records in there. Let's just do a select star. Select star from track. Now, we're probably going to have to restore our connection here. Oh, no, we're good. We're good. But if we head down to the bottom, check it out. Close to the middle, 22. Try this on your own and see what you get. But that just shows you how to do a point-in-time restore. So we do all the backups, and then because we're in the full recovery model, we can do a point-in-time restore. And also, if we want to set this database back to multi-user, we can execute this, and boom. We are operating normally once again. Back to the lab instructions. Let's answer some questions here. What is the difference between the simple and full recovery models? Remember, the simple recovery model, the transaction log is fully managed. We don't have to do any sort of management, but it also means we can't do point-in-time recovery, and we lose a lot of the advanced features around the transaction log. Full recovery model, everything is logged, and we're responsible for that transaction log. And finally here, what is the difference between full, differential, and transaction log backups. Remember, full backups are all the data. Differential is just the data that's changed since the last full backup, and transaction log backups are all the data since the last transaction log backup. Now, our last lab challenge is going to have you create a very basic maintenance plan for ongoing maintenance. So create a maintenance plan for MusicDB to reorganize indexes, update statistics, and check database integrity. Scheduled to run daily at midnight and manually execute the plan. Fairly straightforward to do this one if you know where to look and find them. Remember, it's underneath management down here. So expand management, you'll see maintenance plans. Right click and walk through the maintenance plan wizard. So give it a name, specify your schedule for daily at midnight here. We'll just go ahead and choose daily at midnight. Hit OK. There you go. It's as easy as that. And then walk through and choose your tasks. So I wanted you to reorganize indexes, update statistics, and check database integrity. So you'll walk through this wizard, configure each task, and when it's done, you'll have a maintenance plan and you'll have a SQL Server agent job. And to execute the maintenance plan, just right-click on it and choose Execute. Some questions. What is the difference between reorganizing and rebuilding indexes? Remember, reorganizing is the lightweight operation that's just going to reorganize the leaf levels of the index pages, where rebuilding is going to rebuild the entire index from scratch. The second question here, what SQL Server component is used for automating tasks and running jobs? Yeah, SQL Server agent, and you can do anything with SQL Server agent. You can run, command line utilities, you can run scripts and SQL statements, you can execute SSIS packages. There's a lot of cool things you can do with it. That is your automation tool for automating virtually anything here in SQL Server. And the third one here, what SQL Server component is used for designing processes and data flows? That is SQL Server Integration Services, or SSIS, a wonderful Swiss Army knife for everything that you need here in SQL Server for creating processes and data flows and really anything you can put your mind to, you can do inside of SSIS. In the CBT Lab Nugget, we saw many of those administration tasks that DBAs do every day, from implementing security to working with backup and recovery to automating ongoing maintenance. I want to thank you for joining me here in Database Fundamentals. It's been a fun ride. I hope you continue your journey into the world of databases. There's a lot of paths you can take, and they're all good. Also, good luck if you take the MTA Database Fundamentals Microsoft exam. And if you do want to continue on, check out our SQL Server MCSA courses, 70-461, 462, and 463. They'll take you deeper into the world of querying, administering, and developing SQL Server courses. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.